Every time a non-white has an encounter with law enforcement that results in death or injury, there is a massive outcry, and lately, rioting, about racism and Black Lives Matter. There are so many that to list them all here would take a very long time, so I'm going to touch on mainly the prominent cases.
1992. Rodney King is filmed being beaten by Los Angeles police officers. The officers were subsequently acquitted of using excessive force, and riots erupted in the city of Los Angeles. Thousands of people rioted over the course of 6 days and almost $1 billion worth of damage was caused. 63 people were killed and 2,383 were injured. Military force was brought to bear when the police were unable to control the situation. Rodney King himself was a multiple felon, intoxicated at the time of the arrest, which came after a pursuit reaching speeds of 110 miles per hour. He admitted that did not stop because he was on parole for a robbery at the time and his intoxication would have violated the terms of his parole. 2 of the police officers were then convicted on federal charges and imprisoned in a move many felt was predetermined to placate the black community.
Broadwater Farm riot in 1985. Floyd Jarrett was arrested by London police officers after being caught driving a car with a stolen tax disc. During a subsequent search of his house, his mother suffered a heart attack and died.
The following day, a protest outside the local police station escalated to bricks and petrol bombs being thrown. 2 police officers were injured by gunshots. In the estate, cars were burned and barricades built. Later that day, firefighters trying to extinguish a fire in a nearby tower block came under attack and requested assistance from the police. One of the responding police officers, Keith Blakelock, was hacked to death. The rioters planned to decapitate him and display his head on a scaffolding pole.
London criminal Mark Duggan was shot dead by armed police. Information is conflicted, but it is believed he was planning an armed robbery and in possession of a blank firing pistol converted to fire live rounds. Protests erupted 2 days later in London and spread to other parts of the country including Birmingham, Nottingham, and Manchester. Looting and arson attacks were widespread. Damages were estimated at £100 million. Several businesses had to close due to arson attacks and criminal damage. A 13-year-old girl was raped during one riot, and a 68-year-old man who was trying to put out a fire was kicked to death.
2014 Ferguson protests. A police officer attempted to arrest the black youth, Michael Brown, involved in an assault and robbery. When Brown began resisting arrest, Brown attempted to grab the officer's weapon and in the ensuing struggle and pursuit was shot and killed.
Protests began and escalated to violence. Some people began looting and vandalizing cars, and engaging police officers with confrontational behavior. Riot police were deployed. Protests continued over several days and escalated to missiles being thrown at the police.
2014 Oakland riots. Related to the Ferguson case, a series of riots and civil disturbances took place in Oakland, California following the grand jury decision not to prosecute the police officer involved in the shooting of Michael Brown.
Included mass protests, vandalism, projectile attacks against the police. The Bay Area was disrupted for around 2 weeks.
2015 Baltimore protests. Following the injury in custody and subsequent death of an Afro-American male, a series of protests escalated into rioting with many local businesses suffering looting and vandalism. Military units were deployed to help keep order. 2016 Milwaukee riots. 23-year-old black youth Sylville Smith was running from a police officer whilst armed with a stolen handgun. Footage from the officer's body cam showed Smith turn towards the officer with the gun in his hand before being shot. The officer involved was also black. Coming from a background where deadly force has been necessary, I agree with the officer's actions. The fact the suspect was armed, fleeing, then turned to face the officer with a weapon suggests to me that he may have been planning to open fire.
3 days of protests and rioting ensued, which included a gas station being set on fire, businesses being looted and vandalized, and projectile attacks on the police. Fire engines responding to the fires were also attacked.
Earlier in 2017, a man was filmed being pursued by London police and entering a shop. During the struggle, he puts something into his mouth. It is believed he has then choked on the object and died. A series of protests have taken place, including a stand-up to racism vigil outside the police station. Other protests in the area have escalated into violence, with barricades being built, fires lit and missiles being thrown.
I know he's trying to get away. He's trying to breathe. Then comes back. They couldn't find it. You know the Chinese lady as well. Where he comes, he needs to go searching. Did you get Chinese number? Chinese number, you got it? Huh? Where? There. Hi, how you doing? You got a bag? Abim nerede? Artık bitti yani. Size. How are you doing? I'm very good. How are you? Good, mate. You can shut the door, değil mi? Sana şimdi bulaşık tozu yalatacağım. Al. Eleyim de geri gelmiyor. Selamünaleyküm. Aleykümselam. Ne yapıyorsun sana? Hadi çayla. Sağ ol, siz de iyisin. Family, going? Yeah? Good. Yes, good. Good, yeah, can't complain. Hot? No, it's a good hot. Other bag? No, fine. Sure? Yeah, okay. Good. Çocukta hareket yok artık.
Sen burada mı?
Yok, yok. Gece oldu da. Tamam.
The National Union of Students Black Students campaign tweeted that Charles had been murdered by the Metropolitan Police.
Now I would like to draw a comparison with the reaction when an unarmed white person was shot dead by a black police officer.
Meet Mohammed Noor. Noor had been lauded in the past by Minneapolis Mayor Betsy Hodges and the local Somali community as one of the first Somali American police officers in the area. In 2 years as a police officer, he had 3 formal complaints against him, 2 of which are still to be resolved. In a separate case from May 2017, he is being sued for allegedly assaulting a woman.
Now meet Justine Damond, Nee Ruzchik. On July 15, 2017, Justine called 911 on 2 separate occasions to report a suspected rape or sexual assault taking place. A police car carrying Officer Noor responded. Noor has refused to speak to investigators about what happened and retained a private lawyer. Both the officers had their body cams turned off. The circumstances of the event seem to be that Justine approached the police car in her pajamas and Officer Noor shot her as she approached the car. She died 20 minutes later.
No riots. No worldwide outcry about racism. Nobody turning round and saying that this is a racist shooting. These circumstances are very suspicious to me. Has this officer been charged with anything as the officers in the previous cases have been? I doubt it.
This could be you soon.